Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Yasmin. If you've never seen me before, welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to get these eyeshadow looks. So I made this video for anybody out there who doesn't know how to blend eyeshadow or just apply eyeshadow in general. Hopefully this video is super helpful and let's get into it. So you need a couple of things if you're gonna do this right. You obviously need an eyeshadow palette. You need some brushes. I feel like when you're starting out, you really don't need 1,000 brushes, but I would suggest a few. 2 flat shader brushes, 2 to 3 blending brushes. The good thing is if you only have like 1 or 2, there's a product that you can like dust the excess color off and then you can reuse it. Or if you're like me and you don't want to buy a whole, $20 thing, you can just use paper towel.
That is not an alternative to washing your brushes. I highly suggest that you wash your brushes often.
All these brushes are Morphe. By the way, I don't use super expensive brushes because I feel like these work just as well. But if you can invest in better quality brushes, there's nothing wrong with that. They're just gonna last longer. The next thing that you need is the eyeshadow base. I like this one. This is from Louise. It's basically just like almost like a concealer, but not quite. But it has a little bit more like grip to it, or it's a little bit more tackier. Sets really nicely, and it also matches my concealer. So I like to use this. I would also suggest using a white eyeshadow base if you're gonna do a brighter look, just because depending on the eyeshadow, sometimes the color kind of gets lost. When I'm trying to do less in the long run, this is the technique that I use. I'm gonna start with my Louise base. I'm gonna put a little bit on the back of my hand. I'm just gonna take the product, just kind of like tap into it like this. I'm gonna run it underneath my brow, kind of like almost carving my brow. And then I'm just gonna bring it down. And I'm just gonna take the rest and I'm just gonna apply it all over my eye. You'll see my skin through it, so we want a little bit more coverage. But less is more. It's easier to blend, like to add more than to take away. So I would say start out with that pea-sized amount and then kind of work your way up. So that's what I want it to look like. I want it to look like you can't see my skin through it, but it's not caked on either. Since we've already determined what looks we're gonna create, I'm gonna start with just the everyday eye. Because I feel like if you can do an everyday eye, you can do a smoky eye, then that's like the basics of like eyeshadow. Now that my base is on, I'm just going over it just to make sure that there are no creases, because my eye folds here, but my crease starts here. So oftentimes, if I don't blend that part out before I start doing my eyeshadow, it'll get a little weird and patchy there. When I'm doing my eyeshadow and I'm using a palette like this, comparing it to my skin tone, these 2 shades are gonna be like where I'm gonna start at. These shades are what I'm gonna use to deepen. I'm gonna tap into this burnt orange shade now, and I'm just gonna tap it off. I'm going to start placing that color. Placement is key when you're doing eyeshadow, because if you place it too low, it can close your eye. If you place it too high, it just starts to look a little strange. With my first shade, I always like to start to define the shape of my eye. I'm placing this shade right up in here, and I'm just going side to side because that's gonna give my eye shape. So now that I've placed my shade, I'm gonna start to blend it out. And how I'm gonna blend it out is by going in circular motions across the shape that's already there. Wonderful. You can even blend it down to really define that shape. And that's how I've defined my crease. Oh, and another tip, the base like the Louise base, you don't ever want to add translucent powder to your lid, because when you put translucent powder down, it kind of makes it harder for it to blend. If I want to deepen this, I could go in with sienna, and I could just tuck this right up underneath. Like, you see where I placed it? Right up underneath where I placed that first shade. And I'm gonna start to blend down. That first shade is basically like a guide. Like, this is gonna determine where you put every other shade. So I'm just tucking that right underneath. I'm gonna try my hardest not to bring it up too high. And then I'm just running what's left on my brush across. The motions that I'm using are either side to side or small circular motions in the same shape. So when you want to place a color, I would suggest using the windshield wiper motion, and then when you want to like blend it out, the small circular motion. I can take this a step further and I can add a deeper shade in the corner, and I could just use the same brush. I'm gonna go into Cypress Umber, and I'm just gonna start near my lash line, and I'm just tapping this on, and pretty much there's no more color on here, so I'm just kind of like running this across because I want this shape to stay low on my eye. I don't want to bring it too far up yet. And then I'm just going to tap back in, make it a little bit deeper, and I'm going to start to bring it up into the sienna shade with the pointed brush. Because let's say I want to go back into the sienna shade and just like define that crease a little bit more, which I actually want to do. I put the Cypress Umber on it, so I don't want to get my crease all muddy. And she's practically clean again. So back into sienna, and honestly I could have started with the sienna shade, but that's why I was saying in the beginning, like, you could start with either one. Starting lighter is better because you can always build up a darker shade, but it's harder to take a darker shade away once you've built it up too far. Going back with the M518 into burnt orange, and I'm just gonna clean up that edge of sienna. So yeah, I want to add a little bit more Cypress Umber, and that's the game of blending, truthfully. Like, getting the placement is one thing, but just making sure those colors kind of like marry one another and you can't see where one starts and one ends is the most important part. So I'm gonna go back again with my original brush, and I'm just blending the edge. Let's do the bronze. I'm gonna go with this shade, and I'm just gonna start right before my tear duct, and I'm just gonna bring this shade up. My lid stops right about here, but I'm gonna go above it so that my eye can be open. Okay, I want it to be a little bit more foily, so I'm gonna add more product onto my brush. You don't have to be crazy wet. So I got my lid shade on. I can bring it over a little bit more if I want to, but I don't want to do that. So I'm just gonna tap into sienna, and I'm just gonna run it down across the edge, just so the edge doesn't look so harsh. If you really want a color to be prominent on your bottom, like your bottom lid, this part, you can also place some eyeshadow primer. If you just want to do something simple, I'm gonna go into sienna, and I'm just going to deepen that lower lash line, right? Cool. Now everything on the edge if you want to. You can even go further and go into Cypress Umber. Just a little touch, nothing crazy, y'all. Just so it's super cohesive. But then that also gives you the opportunity to bring this together, right? Real quick, I'm gonna put my foundation on. So, pretty much got my foundation on, right? And once I start to get closer to my eyes, I'm just tapping. The concealer is where I'm really gonna like clean everything up. And even on the inner part of the eye, I could do the same thing. And if I want to, if I like wipe it off and I'm like, oh, it's, you know, it's not really what I want, I could really use that foundation that I placed to really blend that edge out. I'm gonna apply concealer. I'm just gonna use my foundation brush to blend it out. Just on the edge, right? I'm just gonna use the brush that I used to apply my eyeshadow base. And I could just start to blend that up and out. The edge, I can really carve that shape the way I want it. I had to add a little bit more concealer because I was being stingy, right? Just blending that color down. Over here, that's gone a little bit too far, so I'm gonna go right up against it and create a line. To make it look more feathered and blended, I can take my original like crease stamping brush, which was my M158, and then I could just blend that edge. But I'm not going onto the actual shadow. I'm just touching that line right where that concealer was placed. I can even blend the whole damn concealer out with this brush if I wanted to, okay? And just blend until I don't see like a harsh line anymore. So yeah, guys, this is basically how you blend eyeshadow. That's how you blend eyeshadow, honey. It's really about, you know, placement. You want to focus on details and just making sure that everything is seamless. That's the ultimate like way that you have good eyeshadow. Now I'm just rambling, but hopefully this was super informative and this helps. If you have any questions down below, or if you want to see me go in depth about anything else, let me know in the comments. And go ahead and subscribe, turn your post notifications on, and yeah.